every time Eugene and I have had like a guest on the podcast that we were like super excited about. I remember the
It's my
first
fault, probably. Someone should have checked it.
It just like because we used to have it upstairs and like the computer and everything stayed there. I remember the first time we had Stitch on the podcast. Remember him?
Yeah.
So we had Stitch and we were excited about it. You know, he's a big time cut man that's worked in like all these big boxing fights and stuff like that. And we're like, dude, this is going to be great. Super exciting podcast, whatever. And that was when we were first getting started. And all of the equipment literally stayed in the room.
Yeah.
Nothing changed. We come in, turn it on, and sure enough, the software doesn't work. Like, what the hell? So this is how technology works. And
is it working? Give us a thumbs up again, just to make sure. I apologize for the delay.
So
had everything checked, but I guess I didn't.
So since Mastodon joined in Ambulance, there we go. He said he goes, I want to hear Ambulance in live.
All right, guys, let's get into it again. Chewy.
So guys, let me give you the rundown of what we're going to talk about today. So basically the idea today that we're going to chew on that hurts my old joints just thinking about it is whether or not jiu-jitsu is getting more dangerous as it gets more popular. Not that it's like out of control, but this past year I've seen more submissions that have like went to like straight to like a grip and rip sort of scenario, and people have got injured from it at different levels of jiu-jitsu. I've seen more videos of that being shared and kind of floating around than I think I'm used to seeing. And so I was thinking about this, and we'll talk about it in just a second, and compare it to another grappling sport. And again, you guys can chime in with it. And then towards the end of the episode, we'll do some live Q&A, and then we'll also be giving out some different products and gifts to you guys for sticking with us. One of those products will be some of the stuff from Charles Web. They're one of our sponsors for the podcast. They help make the podcast happen. And again, they've got a really cool new product out, because I know a lot of you guys are worried about testing positive for a banned substance or whatever, depending on what you do for work or for sports or stuff like that. They just got an NSF certified seal of approval, whatever you want to consider it. Basically, the NSF is a third-party company that goes in and tests supplements to try to see if they have contained any banned substances that you would pop dirty for if you were playing in professional sports, college sports. The UFC uses them. I believe even the Olympics kind of has something to do with them, right? So basically, they make sure there's no banned substances, because even in like regular over-the-counter like weight training, like bro stuff supplements, every now and then you'll get trace amounts of these like different steroids or different pro hormones and things like that are basically in those same vats that they're being made in. So again, they have a new product that is NSF certified, and it's even I guess what is it, endorsed by the Major League Baseball?
Yeah, MLB. Yep.
So they have a THC free one. So for a lot of you guys that were wanting a THC free one, they have one, and it's cool because it's THC free, but it still has a lot of the terpenes and a lot of the different sort of other chemicals that work along with the CBD that make it effective. And so again, if you guys are interested, you can check that out at charlesweb.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20 for 20% off. And maybe we'll give away one of those.
I think that one actually has, so do have a THC free. This one actually has a very low level, very low level. It's non-detectable. So it still has like, they get it all in the same way that they, everything. So it's got all the terpenes and everything in it, but it's got a very, very small amount, which is not traceable.
But again, it's been basically tested by the NSF, and you're not going to pop dirty for having THC in your system.
Yep.
So that's pretty cool for a lot of you guys that I know that were like asking me about that and worried about it. Also, guys, thanks to Epic Roll. If you're looking at the shirt here, Epic Roll, I dig their stuff. If you guys are in the sort of interested in checking out some of their gear, you can go to epicrollbjj.com. And again, I encourage you to check through some of his t-shirts, shorts, rash guards. I love his shorts, love his rash guards. We'll be doing another order of another jiu-jitsu sort of version of those coming up sometime in the next year. And again, I'm a big fan of his t-shirts. A lot of times you'll see me wearing them in the YouTube videos and everything else. So check him out. He's got all kinds of different gear and stuff like that. Cool designs, high quality stuff. And again, he's been and by I keep saying Matt is the Epic Roll guy. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu who makes jiu-jitsu gear for us, right? The jiu-jitsu people, opposed to some random person that's not involved in our community making stuff. Because that does happen. You get random people just overseas just making stuff to try to sell it. So there's been a couple of those that have made the rounds.
And Matt does a great job, actually, like customer service. He's like takes care of everybody. He does he's always like, it's super important to him. And I think some of these companies don't have the best customer service. These fly-by-night companies or wherever, you never know what you're getting. I mean, you're getting consistent high quality products from Matt.
And he's also a cool dude.
Yeah, it is.
Also, guys, if you guys are a man, or maybe you have a man in your life that wants to step up their grooming game, check out Manscaped. I've used their trimmers. I've used their obviously their little lawnmower here. I use this to trim my beard and other parts of my my manly body. And I've also used their shampoos, their soaps, their balms, everything basically that they have. I like it all. It's all legit stuff. Smells good. And the lawnmower here is a pretty good trimmer. Again, cordless and waterproof. And so if you guys want to check out any of their stuff for for your grooming game, or maybe a different man's grooming game, you can check them out at manscaped.com. Promo code is Chewjitsu20 for 20% off the order, and you get free shipping. It's a good deal. Also, guys, if you want to join our Patreon for the podcast, you can do so by going to patreon.com/the Chewjitsu Podcast. By doing that and joining up, you'll get access to a bunch of exclusive content that we have on the back end, specifically from the podcast and everything else. And then we also give away 2 free bonuses for joining. One is a warm-up routine that Eugene over here did. He put it together for some people that we had in our camp the last couple of years. And it's a 20-minute warm-up routine to focus on like basically mobility and stretching, yes, and also some strength in certain areas, specifically targeting areas that as jiu-jitsu guys, we get really tight in certain areas. And it's targeted towards that, right? So things like in your hips and your shoulders and everything else. And it's 20 minutes. Like, I mean, 20 minutes, if you follow it for like 3 months, I mean, I guarantee you're going to feel better. You won't be as tight. And so if you're kind of an immobile or like sort of inflexible person, it would be a really cool tool to have into the toolbox. And also I give away a seminar that I did a couple of years ago where I show gi and no gi techniques, some of my best techniques that I use both in competition and training, and show them both in the gi and no gi. And you get access to that as a bonus for joining the Patreon. And last but not least, guys, if you're not already a part of it, you can join the Chew Crew email list by going to my website at chewjitsu.net/join, JOIN. By joining, you'll get access to some free ebooks, and you will then get my daily email, which also comes with exclusive offers I don't release anywhere else. So that's the pre-rolls, right?
We did it.
We got all that stuff out of the way for you, so now we can actually get into the show, because I know it's
awesome.
Everybody's like, all right, come on, Chewy, get to the goods.
Hey, you know, the one thing that we do have, sometimes we'll go in the weeds on some of these promos, but we make sure that we do them at the beginning, at the end, so you can, if you choose to skip past them, you can. We appreciate you listening though, and it's always we like to support our sponsors because they take care of us.
Yeah, and also, guys, I think I've said this before in the podcast, but some of you guys may not listen to the podcast. You may listen to the YouTube videos more often. Any of the stuff that we have as a sponsor here has been like used by me and Eugene both, and we both approved on it, because we get requests for sponsorships on a regular basis, and most of them get shot down just because of the fact that I don't like the stuff. And again, a lot of you guys that listen to the podcast or watch the videos, a lot of you are my actual students in my gym. So I can't sell you crap, because I don't have the ability to like live with myself to know that I'm lying to you if you get some really crappy product or crappy experience. And I also sort of consider you guys that watch me from online, you're kind of like this extension of those students, right? So I wouldn't want to sell you junk that I don't use. And so guys, everything that we have, we use, and we like. What's up?
I just want to say Sam joined and he said, nice. Oh, hold on. He said this one. He said, nice, joined directly after the ads ended. So we got to start all over on the ads, guys.
All right, Sam. And here we go.
All right, here we go.
Thanks to our sponsor. No, I'm just kidding. All right, guys. So let's get into it. So this idea, we were talking about this last night, this idea is jiu-jitsu getting more dangerous. So basically, I was thinking about this because this past year, I feel like I've seen more submissions, mainly leg locks, but some other stuff too, where people are grabbing legs or grabbing a joint lock and they're just sitting back and ripping it. They're not even giving that person the chance to submit and tap, where you exercise a little control and then tap, and they just rip it. Now, in the gym, right, we obviously always abide by, there is a rule essentially in the gym that you don't rip submissions, right? You don't break someone's stuff, because again, if we break someone's stuff, then one, you're not a good training partner, and two, good luck trying to find someone to train with. And if you were at my gym, I'd give you the boot. I'm not going to train with someone that's dangerous like that. I'm not going to let them train at my gym. So obviously that's how we train. But in competitions, there are technically no explicit rules that say you cannot just sit back and rip the submission really quickly, right? There are no rules that say that. And a lot of us understand that when you compete, there is that danger where if you do not tap, that person may take your arm or leg or whatever it is past the breaking point. I even did a video where I was talking about it. I said, someone asked me, they said, Chewy, would you break someone's arm in a submission in a competition? I said, yeah, I would. But if I did so, I would be very angry at that person, because if I had to break someone's arm, it's because they didn't tap. They didn't accept the fact that they had been checkmated. The game was over, tap out, and that's it, right? Because I've never broken anybody's anything in a submission. I've always given people ample time to submit. And in the gym, when I train, if I ever have someone that's not tapping, I literally let go. I'm like, I'm not going to break you up in the gym. In a competition, though, I mean, I would, but it's just never happened. I always try to give my opponents, ample time to tap out from a submission so that they don't get hurt. Because again, at the end of the day, I think a lot of us are empathetic towards even our opponents in competition. You may want to win really badly, but we've all, at some point, if you haven't, it's going to happen. You've been injured and you have to sit on the shelf. And there's literally nothing worse than like being sitting on the shelf because of an injury, right? It's the worst thing for us in jiu-jitsu as an athlete, is to have to sit down and not be able to be active and do this thing that you love, that you have grown to sort of depend on in a lot of ways. Because for a lot of us, jiu-jitsu at some point, it's sort of not about competition. It's not about anything else. It becomes almost like a sort of a therapy session for us, where we go in, we train, and we just feel good afterwards. And it kind of creates an anchor for us for our day, right? We tend to be more, happy and relaxed and everything else for the rest of our day after training. And so if we can't do that, that sucks. And so I think a lot of us, even when we're competing and we're in these really like hard moments and stuff like that, we're still mindful of that. I mean, even like in some competitions I've been in where me and opponents have like headbutted each other and stuff. And like, I don't know this guy from anyone else. Well, literally, like at some points, like, sorry about that, bro. And we continue to go and try to rip each other's head off, but it's like, hey, sorry, we kind of skirted a little bit out of the rules for a second, but I'm just checking on you, And so with that, that's kind of my thought process, is like, this is happening, is that you see people, ripping these submissions. And again, there's no rule to say it's wrong, but again, is it okay? Because we've always sort of, that's what's been happening earlier since I've started practicing jiu-jitsu. We've always operated from this sort of cultural acceptance of, you always give the person about at least a half second to tap. I mean, even watch some of the best guys at the ADC and stuff, like watch Nicky Rod when, Gordon caught him and stuff like that. Gordon gave him time.
He held him. He held it there.
He's like, I got you. Like, you ain't getting out of this, right? I've got you. You know what I mean? And sometimes guys do get popped, but a lot of times it's because they are trying to escape and they don't accept that submission. And then that's what happens. But they still had time to tap, opposed to someone ripping it. Now, here's the contrast to this, right? Because in judo's a little different. So first off, in competition in judo, they don't have access to the array of submissions that we do. A lot of stuff's off the table. A lot of submissions are not allowed, right? And so they have a smaller pool of submissions that they can choose from. But I remember I've listened to several competitors talk about this, where in judo competitions at like high levels, like world and Olympic level, when they get a submission, they're going to rip that stuff for a couple of reasons. One, they don't have a lot of time on the ground to play. Like in jiu-jitsu, we have lots of time on the ground to methodically work, to get really good control and take our time with stuff, right? Whereas in judo, they're on like a ticking clock. And if they don't advance towards something very quickly, they'll stand them right back up. If you've never watched a judo match, like they'll get to the ground, they'll kind of scramble for a second. And if nothing happens, boom, they're right back to their feet most of the time. And then the other thing about it is that, let's say if, for instance, like one of the, like a really common submission that could be used in judo is an armbar, right? So if someone gets you like for armbar, let's say armbar from the guard, right? So let's say if you shoot an armbar from the guard and that person's like arm is extended, if that person begins to lift you up to a certain point, you then have to let go of that arm. And the reason being is because in sort of the idea with judo is that if I can pick you up, which I believe is correct, right? If I can pick you up off the ground, I could slam you on the ground and dump you and basically knock you out. And so from that standpoint, from a fighting aspect, because there's still a fighting aspect of judo, right? Even though it is a sport, from the fighting aspect, they're like, well, you have to let go of the arm because we don't want you to get slammed on your neck and you get injured, right? So you have to let go, then the match restarts. And so basically the thought process is if I break them before they stand up, then they'll have to tap. Yeah. Right. So you get to that point. So just immediately rip it. And so you see that in judo a bit. And so my curiosity is this going to become something that becomes more commonplace as jiu-jitsu becomes more popular, as more money pours into it, as it becomes more prestigious, as the competition gets stiffer and stiffer, right? Are we going to have a situation where people will sit back on submissions and just rip them and not give the person an adequate time to tap? Or is it going to be something where, maybe I've seen a few videos and maybe this is just a blip and we're still going to operate with the cultural sort of norm of, hey, even when you get your opponent in a competition, when you get them in a submission, you're going to give them a second to tap, right?
Yeah.
You're going to give them a second to tap before you take it past the breaking point. And so that's kind of like the thought process. So for you guys, I'm curious what you think. Do you think it's going to be a situation where in jiu-jitsu, like ripping submissions and popping things and joint locks, will that become more commonplace? Or do you think it's going to be something where it just happens every now and then, and as jiu-jitsu gets bigger, these little like one-off occurrences will just become more common because there's just more of them, because there's more people doing it? Or do you think it'll become more common at the higher levels of jiu-jitsu because people have more on the line to win, more everything else, and they're just like, I don't care, I'm just going to rip their foot and pop, 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 pop in their arm or whatever? And so I'll leave it to you guys to sort of chime in with your thoughts. And, Eugene, you can kind of like sort of tell me what you think.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you said. I think like you've got the stakes are higher, number one.
Is that your phone?
I don't know. Shouldn't be.
It's your iPad.
Oh, all right. Anyways, guys, so the stakes are higher. That's part of it. Then the other thing is, you're looking at like a lot more sample size, like Chewy said. So there's a lot more like of people, ripping stuff, and Chewy can sit that out there. It's fun. A lot more people like ripping stuff, and I think there's more sample size of it, essentially. But like the stakes are higher because now there's money involved, right? You've got money involved on some of these tournaments, like the IBJJF. Still, it's not really money unless they have those Grand Prix tournaments or whatever. But there's a lot more money involved in these. There's more on the line. You got more to lose. So I don't know. It's one of those things that's kind of interesting. Like, are you trying? I mean, usually those videos as well. Like somebody rips something, you're seeing those on the internet, like making their rounds. So I mean, you're kind of get a little more notoriety, and I don't know if that has anything to do with it.
Yeah, I don't know. And I was even thinking about I wonder if like maybe these people that sometimes do it, I wonder if they've experienced some really gut-wrenching injuries. Because, because to me, it's like, if you've experienced a really nasty injury, like, it's like, I think I was talking to, or I heard like someone talking about Brandon McGaffron, and he's talking about how he's popped people's, like sometimes in competition where he's like, I hate it. He's like, I get mad at them for making me do it, because it's like, again, I'm taking something, again, it's like playing a chess game. Let's say if I put you in checkmate, and all of a sudden you want to keep moving the pieces. It's like, bro, like I just won, right? So it's like, I don't think it's fair to say, well, you if someone doesn't tap, you shouldn't submit them. It's like, no. If I catch them as submission in a competition, they're supposed to stop. They're supposed to say, you got me, uncle, I'm done, right? Because then it's like, otherwise it's like, well, then if that person got away with it, then like submissions would just be like, if nobody submitted to submissions and nobody was willing to take it to that point, then we wouldn't tap, and because think of it, the whole reason why we tap is the threat of a break.
The threat's got to be
the threat has to be reasonable. Otherwise, we'll never tap, because we're like, oh, well, we don't have to worry about it.
Do referees have this? Like, do you think? I mean, maybe at the younger,
especially with kids, of course, with
kids, yes. But like, do you see that there's any way that may come into play, like referees and stuff? I mean, I don't think it should, because some people can eat submissions. They're willing to, right?
It's so hard, bro. Because like, for me, I have pretty, like, my arms are fairly tight, so I don't have like crazy range of motion, but I've seen guys that can bend their arms back slightly. Yeah. So, I mean, again, that's a personal thing. That's on them. I've just seen that's like, personal responsibility.
It is. And then some of these kimuras and stuff, like these shoulder. I mean, those are like, some of those things are career enders. Like, you're never going to be the same.
Right. And so, and then that's why I go back to that. Right. So like, I wonder if some of these people that do these submissions, have you never had a like life altering / career altering injury? Because if you haven't, let's say if you have, and you're still willing to just rip something on someone, it makes me question, maybe you're not, if you're like a sociopath, because it's like, do you have no empathy for the other person, that like, you're not giving them even a chance? And if you haven't, then it's like, well, you have you have blissful ignorance, right? Because you've never experienced it. So you're like, yeah, I'm just going to rip the submission. It's like, when you talk to, like, say, a young person, for instance, and you tell them, like, as you get older, you need to train a certain way because you're going to get injured. A lot of times it's one ear out the other, and they only really listen to the advice once they get older and they've experienced what you were talking about. Because again, it's one of those things, to hearing and to understand it, to know it's true on some level, but then once you actually feel it and you can embody that sensation or whatever that is, that's a different thing. That's really when you really learn that lesson. And so my thing is, I wonder sometimes with some of when I see these matches, I'm like, I wonder if they've had a really bad injury And if they're still willing to do that, or if it's like they're like still in that point where maybe their body's still young, they've had some little tweaks and stuff like that, but nothing really bad. Like, because again, you think if you really rip a really bad heel hook or whatever, you could, obviously the ankle could be destroyed. You could just go up to the knees and attack. The knee could get really messed up.
Probably the knee is like, people pop their ankles all the time, or they get ligaments and some of that stuff torn in their ankle. The knee's where it's at. Like if you tear your ACL, I mean, that's, for anybody out there, like the research even shows if you come back earlier than 9 months, you have a higher risk of re-injury. Yeah. And here's the other thing. When you injure one leg, the other leg gets compromised too. So now you're looking at,
because you compensate
100%. So what you're having is, so they'll see a lot of people, like, I don't know the exact numbers, but like, if you have a first ACL, you have like a 20 or 30% chance like of tearing, or higher chance of tearing the other leg. And a lot of it's because you're more favorable to the other. You're using the other leg a lot more. So it's just one of those things, like those ACLs, and they're usually never as strong. Yeah. They're never as strong as your original tissue was. Yeah. It's good, it's strong, and you're probably more aware, and you do a lot more strength training around it.
Better than not having one. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And some people don't have them, they can train with them, but and I think it limits your game in some capacity of like what you can and can't do. Like for jiu-jitsu, I think you can get away with it in some ways. If you're not wrestling, very different. I mean, your stand-up's not going to be great. Being able to pivot and change directions, not great. Yep. And then if you have a lot more joint movement in your joint, it stresses the meniscus and the other ligaments. And so it's just something, it's just not great. And I don't know, like, I think you might be right in a couple aspects. Like you said, there's larger sample size of people, the skill level's getting higher too. And so, I don't know. I
just saw one the other day, and it was like, it like stood out. It's like the dude sat back on a heel hook, ripped the heel hook. I mean, there was no point where that guy could have, like, it's like if it would have, the guy, he literally just sat back and was like, pop, and you could just see the dude like rearing up and like holding his knee afterwards. You're like, that guy didn't have a chance. It was like someone mentioned, Will Z mentioned Paharis, right? Well, Huzamar, right? Yeah, it's like, it's not a cool thing, right? It's like, bro, like, and his was even, Huzamar's was even bad sometimes, because he would, like, people would be tapping,
not letting go,
and he would continue to submit them. Like, bro, like, because I remember there was that one match where it was like, it was really bad, where the guy was tapping and he's just ripping it still. And it's like, that's pretty bad. Cause then it's like, not only are you ripping the submission, but now you're not even respecting the person saying, I don't want to do this. I'm done.
Yeah.
Like, you beat me.
I think in some ways, is it worse than like in MMA when somebody gets knocked out cold and you go in and they're knocked out and you hit them again? Is that the same thing? Is it in some way similar?
I don't think so, because I think sometimes, like in a fight, if you've ever like fought in an MMA fight and dropped someone and had someone fall down, and like, you don't necessarily know that they're out yet, because again, it's happening so fast. Yeah. On TV, it looks like things are happening and they look so smooth and slow, but when you're in those moments, it's really fast. I remember like punching guys and doing stuff. And things are happening so fast. And when you go back and look at it from a TV standpoint, it doesn't look that fast, but then when you're in it, it's all happening so quickly. And so, a lot of times people are they're amped up. They're like, oh, I gotta finish this guy. Yeah. So this fight's over. Because again, if you've ever fought MMA, it's a brutal thing. And you're like, when you win an MMA fight, it's not like a excitement and joy. It's like, oh God, finally it's over. All this, like all this stress that's on you, it's gone, it's done with, and you came out victorious. It's a good feeling. And so you're fighting to make sure that's over. And how many fights have you seen someone drop and they pop back up?
Yeah, exactly.
So you're trying to end it. To me, when a person's like saying, like, when they're tapping and you continue to attack, that tells me something, like something's mentally off about you.
Yeah, I think like it, and maybe the reason, for example, like a heel hook or things like that, people are so good at slipping their heels out and stuff. So once you get it, you got to go for it, or otherwise they're going to start defending right away. And
that also says that your control's not so great.
Yeah,
because again, at the end of the day, it's like, if you've got the control, you can apply it at whatever speed you want. Again, you look at the best people in the world, and those guys have the ability to do that.
Yeah.
But there are submissions that, again, like certain locks on the leg and stuff like that, where they're fast and they have to be quick, even like wrist locks and stuff like that, where it can be difficult because you have a little bit less control.
Yeah, I think Steam lock's probably one of those.
Steam locks can be that way.
It can be. You get it
because that person can rotate and stuff like that. So it's gnarly. So, but it's just one of those things. I was just thinking about that because I saw that that thing, and the guy got up and was like, won the match and stuff like that. I was like, man, that sucks. Like if I pop someone's stuff, like, I've never intentionally popped anything, and I've had guys get injured and stuff on accident. I'm like, man, this sucks. Because at the end of the day, I want to win, but I don't want you to like have to sit on the shelf after our competition because I went and ripped anything.
Yeah, and you don't think that people do that in practice? Otherwise, like you said, they're not going to have they're not going to have training partners. No training partners. You're not going to do that, so you're probably not someone that does that in practice.
And usually, sometimes there are guys that do that, and they end up having to gym hop, like because they can't. Because every time they go to a gym, they get kicked out because their training practice. Because there are all those guys.
Yeah, but I mean, you get like Pahar. I don't know if anybody wanted to train with him. I don't know if anybody would.
Maybe he's a really nice training partner. Maybe, maybe just some crazy competition.
I didn't meet him, but we were like at 4th Street, like where they had fights. Maybe it was Bellator or something, and we went to dinner afterwards, and they were sitting there, him and a bunch of guys.
He fought here in Louisville.
He did. Maybe it was a UFC.
It was 2011. He fought here in Louisville.
I remember I was sitting he was sitting like at a table across from us. And
bro, he's short and he's as wide as a house.
Dude,
he's so wide.
Tank.
Yeah.
He's a scary looking dude. I mean, but I don't know with all that stuff. I think the prevalence of social media and techniques and stuff being posted all the time. Like, I think that maybe that makes it more prominent or appear more prominent than it is.
What's that?
The injuries.
Well, yeah, and like I said, it's not like it's so crazy, but I'm just wondering because again, like when you look at like judo and those kinds of things, as the sports got bigger, it's like guys are just ripping submissions, and it made me wonder. Like, I wonder if like you're going to see more and more of that where guys get caught in a submission, they don't even have a chance to tap because people are willing to just take it past the breaking point right out of the gate.
Yeah.
You know, and so that was just my thought. And again, I have no answer to it. It's more of just an idea that we were talking about last night that sort of created an interesting conversation with me and some of the students. And so I figured we would throw it out here for a podcast, being that, podcast is essentially a conversation. And since we were doing a live podcast, I figured it would make for a good conversation back between all of us to just continue the conversation between us.
Well, let's hear your all's insight and your ideas on this.
Yeah, I think they've been putting some stuff in.
They have. Already. Okay, well, I'm working through the first half of no sound, no audio. You're gonna repeat everything, and somebody's reading lips or something like that. So yeah, so Chewy, I just saw your post. Damn technology. All right, guys. So
you weren't paying attention. I was
sweating. So anyway. So let's see.
Keep going.
We'll go down. Let's see.
There we go.
We got one. El Salvador. Somebody's from there. So here, let's start from the bottom. We'll just start here. So send us some questions, guys, whatever you have. So Will Z, do you think that's a trend that you see from Will Z?
I look forward to more players than that. I mean, I think that for the most part, I mean, that's always, obviously Danaher's crew does it really well. And I think that they did a lot to, in certain positions to show different ways to control and to add pressure and things like that. But I think like that's always been sort of the underlying backbone or ethos of jiu-jitsu, right? Is to control a position like to such an extent that a person essentially is helpless, and then being able to add pressure and submit them when you're ready. And so I think that obviously Danaher has taken that up a step, taking it up a level in certain positions. But again, I think that's always what's been the underlying ethos. That was always from the time I started jiu-jitsu, the idea of position before submission was always like crammed into our head over and over and over again, and so we were never taught to go into positions and just rip submissions. Right now, there were times where in certain leg locks, for instance, that's a great example of John Danaher's stuff, right? With certain leg locks, we didn't know the proper ways to control them. And so we didn't know how to apply them properly back then, where you would have to sit back and rip like heel hooks because you didn't know actually how to like hold that person in a, way where they just were, done and they knew they were done. Right. And so that was a situation back then. But again, that's always been the thing of jiu-jitsu is to.
Let me read it. So here's an example, maybe a little bit of counterpoint from 50-50. And he says, a good example is the Craig Jones, Gordon Ryan, EBI armbar. You remember they started in like spiderweb position. It really looks like Craig was holding the light pressure, expecting the tap. What do you think of that match? I don't know if I remember the specifics exactly, but it looks like I thought Gordon, it looked like his arm was pretty well hyperextended, and Gordon had some making faces and stuff.
So I think that sometimes, so here's something, if you've never taken like an arm to a certain point, a lot of people may underestimate, first off, how much like wiggle room there is in the arm before it actually, like when we get to a break, all the capsules and all the different tendons that are holding there, and then how far it has to go. It's not as easy as like pulling a little pressure, then the arm just pops off, right? I mean, I say that, but I mean, I think sometimes people think that if you like, because we get to this like straightened out position right here, right? Yeah. And I think that a lot of people think that if you go like just one more degree here, it's going to, all of a sudden your arm's just going to explode. That's not what happens. You'll get all these hyperextensions and you'll be sore. Like I remember having my arm hyperextended from an arm bar when early on in jiu-jitsu, and the sucker bothered me for like 6 months, but I mean, it was fine. My arm wasn't broken. I didn't have that hinge in the back of my elbow popped off or anything like that. I didn't need surgery. And so sometimes, you know, again, if you've been in those situations, you can let your arm hyperextend a little bit. And I think that Gordon's arm was probably hyperextended to a degree, and he was able to kind of fight out of it. You know, that said, I don't know, but I think that I'm sure Craig was applying some pressure because I think he wanted to win. And so I don't think he was applying a light tap. I think he was putting pressure into it. But I think sometimes people underestimate how much power you actually have to put into stuff to actually sufficiently break. Because again, like that your arm has all these different muscles and tendons and things holding it in place to keep it there. So, and then think about a grappler like Gordon. I mean, the dude's no like weakling. So imagine that his whole body, all those muscles have been strengthened, and all those tendons have been strengthened from years of training and everything else. And so when he's extending, it's not going to be as simple as just kind of apply a little extra pressure, then the arm blows up. He's going to have a little bit of wiggle room there to hyperextend. And there's been several guys that you've seen have that happen. Now, if you want to see kind of go the other way, you can go look at the match with Tedere and it's Jacare. Jacare and Hadji, right? And you see Jacare get his arm just get crack, and that arm was done. Right. Like, you know, that arm was gone. Like at the end of it, he's like holding it up here and running around with the limp. And again, that's kind of a weird thing too, because you're like, well, his arm's broken, you know, and like, you know, like what happened? Like, let's just play like a silly theoretical argument here. Imagine like you had a guy where you put him in an arm bar, break it, he doesn't tap. Put him in another arm bar, you break, he doesn't tap. You put him in a heel hook, he doesn't tap. You at what point is like, you know, it's like, does it become kind of like the Black Knight from Monty Python, you know, where he's just like, it's just like, this is silly. Like, what are we doing here? You know, so again, I mean, there was that. So that was a good example of seeing it broken and really popped off, and then him not being able to use it. But I think that, I think Gordon was probably Craig was putting pressure. I just think Gordon probably had just a little bit of wiggle room there, was able to maintain that position just a bit.
Yeah, he was able to eat it. And I think, some people have just naturally more laxity in their joints. Their joints will just move further. They'll straighten. Their arm will straighten even past that. They hyperextend like that. So they normally just, their joints are more lax, so they can take a little more. They don't feel a lot of pressure with it. So it's just that those are kind of dependent. And I think somebody mentioned it's why people prefer chokes. You know, somebody wrote in the comments like, well, yeah, chokes are, anybody can get choked out.
Well, and that's like something I did a video for. It's not up yet, but I was talking about the idea of like, someone was asking me like what kind of submissions I would focus on in a fight situation. And for the most part, a lot of it's going to be chokes, or it's going to be like locks that have some restraint element to them, like a Kimura, things like that. Whereas like you know, an arm bar, I guess maybe if I have to, but I'm not a big fan of arm bars because people consider chomp on your arm and everything else. And also, like Eugene and I were talking about, like there's certain submissions that I wouldn't use on an untrained person because they don't know to respect them. You know, because again, when you train, like early on, for instance, like if I have a brand new guy that walks into the gym, you know, we're allowed to put them in chokes and stuff like that to kind of, you know, show them jujitsu. Like, I just caught you in a choke, man. You know, see how that works. But like, we're not going to catch them in an arm lock, a wrist lock, a heel hook or anything like that, because they don't know any of that stuff, and they won't really know when they're caught. There's some education that has to take place first before you know, oh, I just got caught in a wrist lock, or I got caught in an arm lock, right? Like for instance, I have a white belt who's been training with us for a bit, and I put him in a wrist lock the other day, and I got to the point where I felt the in range of motion with his arm. And so I said, hey bro, does your wrist hurt? And he said, yeah, that doesn't feel very good. I was okay. Well, that means like I'm at the in range. Like I'm actually, this is a tap. I was like, if I keep going, I could break your wrist. He's like, oh, okay, cool. And he tapped, no big deal. And so now he's educated on a gooseneck wrist lock. But if like I was going to like fight some guy, and then the reason why I brought this up was because, you know, you see all those like old self-defense things and they're doing these wrist locks and stuff. And I was like, man, like do a wrist lock to someone that doesn't know what a wrist lock is. They don't really respect it. And if you were on a fight on the street with all that adrenaline going, you could break someone's wrist and they're going to be like, whatever, I'm going to try to punch you now. Like, I mean, it's not the end all. So I'm going to focus on chokes and like restraints and stuff on people that are untrained, more so than, some wrist lock or something like that.
Yeah, somebody talked about like maybe adjusting or regulating certain submissions. I mean, I think you do that.
Well, that's what happened with judo.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of submissions that aren't on the table anymore. So
it's hard to like, I mean, so you kind of do that at white belt. You don't allow certain submissions at white belt, twisting. But again, I think, Kimuras are allowed for most belts and Americanas, and those are kind of twisting submissions.
Super dangerous.
Yeah, they are. Because you can tear somebody's rotator cuff, which is, just as devastating in some instances as we're just more used to those, but those are more normalized, well-known than leg locks. So I don't know. Like, I think that, that's just some of the stuff that you'll deal with. Let me see if there was one that
it's the roids that make it dangerous.
Somebody put this. I mean, I think, people being powerful and strong. I mean, of course, how it has a role in it. I mean, I think
I'm training a B team and they're all on roids. I don't want to do it, but I want to be the best. What do I do? Oh God, man.
Yeah. So here's this one. We talked about that too. People getting exposure from it. Is that something that,
let's hear from William
Vacurano.
Yeah. I think there's a sort of hunger to become a pro as we are moving to mainstream, where people want to have a highlight reel to get some exposure and disregard the opponent's well-being. There definitely could be some of that. There could definitely be some of that narcissism going into it, because everybody's always trying to post stuff that puts them in a good light on social media, right? So it could definitely be something where, hey, look at me, look how cool I am, and I just ripped this dude's stuff off. Although I don't think that looks very cool personally. Again, it's like I look at it like super negatively. If I see someone like rip, I was like, man, like that wasn't cool at all. Like, makes me not like you, personally, because I don't want to see people get ripped unnecessarily. If they break something and they weren't tapping, that's one thing. But I also think that obviously with younger people that are just out there doing that could definitely be a thing where they're just basically trying to grip and rip, and then basically post it up. I mean, look how cool I did at this tournament. I just snatched it up and just ripped that submission off and, took a sub, got the money, everything else. And there could be a bit of that too.
I think you feel more invincible as a young person. Like nothing can hurt you. And so I think you're willing to get in that firefight and that stuff to happen.
Well, you have the arrogance of ignorance. Right? Because you can be arrogant about it because you're ignorant towards it, right? Like, again, the minute you have experience with something, it changes very quickly, so it's like when you do jiu-jitsu, right? Everybody comes in and they think they're going to be this or that. Not everybody, but a lot of people think they're going to be a certain level, and then they come in and they're like, whoa, I suck at this. You came in arrogant because you were ignorant towards it. And so some people, I think, can be arrogant with like the way that they treat other people's bodies, because they're like, I'm like, my body's great, man. I'm like 22 years old, whatever. And then as soon as something happens to you, like, oh, I am human. I am mortal. So,
well, and you don't realize that you have to really watch that stuff as a young person, because the cumulative damage, adds up.
By the way, when are we going to give away the gifts?
We can do now.
Well, I'm saying, like, should we be giving away the gifts for some of the comments or something?
Yeah, let's do it. So I didn't even think about it.
Yeah, because I know we forgot about it. So we'll answer some more, but what are we going to give away today?
So we're going to give a couple tinctures of the sports CBD.
Okay.
I'll give away a product, like a rehab product from my website, jujitsutherapist.com. So I'll give away a product. And then what you got, Chewy?
So here's
what I totally forgot about.
I know. Here's what we got, guys. Here's what we got on the table today. We got 2 tinctures of CBD. We've got a rehab product that Eugene has,
like some courses. I'll give away a couple courses.
So Eugene's going to give away 2 of his courses to you.
Yeah, and they can just choose whichever. They can get on the website and choose.
I have 2 books that I'll give away. I've got like my little Survive book. Usually I give away as a bonus with some of my products. You can't buy them anywhere, but I'll give them to you as a gift. I have 2 journals to give away. 2 journals. I created the journal. It's a jiu-jitsu training journal, and has all kinds of prompts and stuff like that you can use. Basically, I took all the different sort of prompts and styles of journals that I like and put it into one. And then I'll give away 2 courses. And I'll let you guys have some choice there, depending on what you want. And so when we answer one of your questions as we go through it, or we pop you up, we'll give you a choice. And so, William,
we'll do William.
William, let us know what you want in the comments below, and we'll hook you up later on. So actually, yeah. So let us know in the comments. Actually, let's not do that, because then we'll have to go through back and forth.
Why don't we do one of the CBDs? So we'll start with that.
So William, if CBD is legal in your country, let us know, because it's not legal everywhere. If not, we'll give you something else. But if CBD is legal in your country, then just shoot us a message, Instagram, email, whatever, and then we'll get with you about sending those over. If it's not legal in your country, just put a comment down below. And
why don't you guys send a message to the Chewjitsu Podcast at gmail.com.
I'll put that up there.
Yeah, I'll put it up there.
Okay.
I think that'll be perfect. And I'll send everything to Chewy.
That'll be good. Yeah. Send it to the Chewjitsu Podcast email that Eugene's going to put up in the chat, and then that'll probably be the best way.
Yep. Let's do another one, Chewy.
Right.
How about this one?
You
right
pick
here?
one.
That might be an interesting one.
So from Anjum Pervez says, I have my first ever tournament next week. Do you have any advice? Yes, I'm blind. So man, with the first competition, this is kind of always the same thing. It's really just about getting out there and doing it. You have to get out there and do it, because people can tell you about it. We can give you advice. We can do all that stuff. But until you actually get out there and experience it for yourself, you're not going to know, man. You're just not going to know what it's like. It's a different feeling. It's just like what we're talking about here. It's one thing to talk about it. It's one thing to discuss it or train for it or deal with it, whatever. It's another thing to actually have it happen to you. And so when you go into a competition, your first one is just to do your best. Now, that said, my big encouragement to you would be to really focus on your game plan. What are you going to do when that match starts? One of the things that happens a lot of times with people early on is they freeze up, they kind of lock up. So you definitely want to make sure that you're putting a lot of focus on when you're getting ready to compete, what's your opening move going to be? Are you going to go for a single leg takedown, a guard pull to a sweep of some sort? What are you going to do when the match starts? Because that's really important, because a lot of times what will happen is someone can be very tense and very tight. And then as soon as they get the match going, all of a sudden, boom, they open up. And, because they're doing jiu-jitsu at that point. But a lot of times they'll lock up and they will be gun shy about going for something because they're thinking too much. So as soon as you can kind of get the jiu-jitsu happening, a lot of times you get your brain to turn off, and then you can just go to rolling. And again, whether you win or lose is kind of, it matter. It doesn't really matter. It's your white belt tournament. When you're a black belt and you're still competing at black belt or whatever, you're not really going to care too much about your first white belt tournament that much. But it's important that you do it so you can understand what you're training for. And then a lot of times that'll make you better in the long run.
Okay. So William said it's not legal. So you want to give him a journal for William?
So William, do this, and I will send you a course. One of my courses. So send up an email with your info, and we'll send you a course. We'll add it to your email. Right. So just send us your email and let us know what email you would like us to add it to, and then we'll send you a course.
Got it. Yep. So
and then Anjum.
Yep. Anjum Pervez, let us know.
Anjum, let us know if you would like either a CBD or a CBD tincture, if it's legal, or I can give you a course. Those are your choices.
Yep. And just if you win, just send us an email at thechewjitsupodcast@gmail.com. Just send us one there.
Right, let me pick one out now.
All right, go ahead, Chewy.
So let's see. I'm going to scroll. Actually, I'll just look at your scrolling.
Okay. Did we go down?
Yeah, just kind of go down. Go back up real quick. Slow down. Keep going. Down. Sorry.
This way?
Down. No, just
okay, down. Gotcha.
Actually, go back up then.
All right.
Just go up a little bit. I feel like we bounced around a little bit.
Yeah.
Keep going.
I think we went through some of those.
Just pick one out if you see one.
All right. I think
I'm gonna go through the things here.
Yeah, go for it. I'm gonna see. So somebody asked, I don't know who it was. Let me look.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this one's about rule changes. We'll see. So this is from Joe Nielsen. He says, are there other rule changes that are important to safety, similar to the ban on jumping guard. Now, I don't know if is that banned?
It's banned at white belt.
White belt. Okay.
Yeah. Some tournaments will ban it, but it's banned at white belt.
And some what are those? Like some of the regional tournaments, they allow do they allow reaping? Some of those
depends. Honestly, here's my thing. I think a ban on guard jumping is a good one. I think that doing the leg scissoring, the jumping leg scissor takedown, that's a good one to ban. The reaping, I never understood why it was illegal. Why it was made illegal. Because back when I was a white belt, we didn't know what the term reaping was. It wasn't a thing. It was if someone puts their their foot in like this, you grab their foot and you remove it. You begin to fight that in some way. And then around purple belt, it became reaping. And it was all of a sudden it was a big deal. I never understood. I remember going to my the first tournament as I went to a tournament as a purple belt, and they said no reaping. And I had to raise my hand because I was I don't know what that is. What is reaping? Can you show me that? And so it's hard to say what other changes could be made to provide more safety. Because again, in the end, you're doing a sport that has the potential for, not safe things to happen, right? For injuries to happen and things like that. But you still want to make sure that there's a bit of safety going on. And I think that a lot of times, as far as jiu-jitsu goes, most of the time, tournaments and stuff like that are relatively safe. I think that the stuff that you can do the most for safety purposes, to be honest, one thing that would be really important is to properly train takedowns. That really has nothing to do with rules. That has to do with training, because I've seen guys not have any takedown experience whatsoever, and they get out there on their feet, and then they go up against some person that does have takedown experience, and they get dumped on their head. They don't know how to properly fall. They don't know how to go with it, and it ends up kind of bad. I remember one of my students years ago, he shot in for a beautiful double leg, gets up under the guy, and instead of sprawling, the person just sort of leans over his shoulder. And my student, we would teach him basically to shoot in for the double, come up, and then finish at an angle. Basically, you're making almost an L shape. And so as he did that, this person's body's coming up in off the ground. And I remember the ref, he stopped the match because the dude was in pain afterwards. The team screaming, his other team screaming that he got slammed. And then, I'm talking to the ref, and I watched the match, and I'm watching it again. I was like, man, I'm watching the replay on the video that we had, because we were taking the video of it. And, I came up to the ref, and I knew the ref. I said, hey, Rob, listen, I'm just going to say this with you. I'll respect whatever you decide whatever call you make, but his knees came down with his body. That would have been a legal slam in high school wrestling. I was like, the guy just doesn't know how to sprawl. I mean, it sucks. I'm not happy that the person's injured, but he doesn't know what he's doing. And so I think that, and even with training purposes, right? I was talking to someone else, we've had less injuries with leg locks after we train them more.
Yeah.
Right. It's so it's one of those things where people will sometimes categorize things as safe or unsafe or whatever. But I think a lot of times it comes down to their experience in training with them and actually knowing how to work with them. These are tools, these are weapons. And with any weapon, if you work with it and you understand how it works and you train with it, it's not a dangerous thing in the proper hands. But you give someone who's untrained with it, doesn't know how the darn thing works, it's a super dangerous thing, right? And so that would be my thoughts on that. And so, brother, I don't know where you are located, but if you want to get a tincture, let us know, and you can send us an email. Or if CBD is not legal in your area, just let us know. But otherwise, send us an email, and we'll send your tincture to you. And let's do that super chat.
Yep. Chris C says, hey guys, I got friends that want to get into BJJ. However, they also tell me they're a little intimidated to start. Any advice to help them? Thank you.
So Chris, thanks for the super chat, bro. Appreciate the blessing. So intimidated to start. So
remember Ben, we talked about him yesterday, 6 months to get into the gym, right? We had one of our coaches now, who's a professional MMA fighter. Yeah.
So that's one to sort of throw out there. I've talked about the story before. I've got a student in the gym, one of my black belts now. He started training at the gym. And when he started training at the gym, he's super nervous. It took him 6 months to get into the gym. He would drive up, park his car. We used to have a little neon open sign that would flash when we were open. He would look at the sign, but yeah, I'm going to go in there and train. And then he would leave. He would drive up. He did this for 6 months. And then eventually he finally mustered up the courage to step in. And then it was afterwards, he was just, it was perfect. It was great. Exactly what he wanted to do. He ended up coming in at 270 pounds, was chunky and overweight. And now he's, he had his first MMA fight about 2 years later. And he fought at 170 pounds. And, actually about 2.5 years later, fought at 170 pounds, lost a bunch of weight, became a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. And at the time, now he's a black belt. He's a coach. He gets paid. He's a professional coach. Like, he actually gets paid to do the stuff at the gym. And so, it's one of those things where I think anytime we get into something that pushes us out of our comfort zone, it is going to be intimidating at first. That's what's going to happen. And here's the deal. A lot of times people will think that they have a confidence issue. They'll say, I have a lack of confidence. I was talking to a student about this the other day. They think they have a lack of confidence. You don't have a lack of confidence for this situation. You have a lack of exposure. Think about anything in your life that you've ever done. A lot of times you're intimidated in the beginning. You're nervous in the beginning. You feel unsure of yourself in the beginning. I mean, this is true from everything from riding a bike to talking to girls to jiu-jitsu. It doesn't matter, everything, right? But what happens after you expose yourself to it more and more and more? What happens? You become more sure of yourself. You become more confident in the activity as long as you're continuing to work at it. And so I think that, and one last thing, maybe throw out there, here's a completely different example. One of the more funny examples I like to share about this intimidation before you get started was one of my first dancing lessons. I was dating this woman who did salsa dancing. And, so I'm infatuated with her. So I want to go salsa dancing with her so I can connect with her and do this thing and this activity together. So I've never done a dancing lesson before. It's not really something I would do. So I was super, super nervous going in there. I mean, I was so nervous. I felt like I was sweating bullets and everything else, right? Because not only am I doing something that's completely out of my comfort zone, but then I'm also with this, trying to impress this girl that I'm interested in, right? So you got this dual effect going. So it was so funny to me that I was an MMA. I literally just had my, an MMA fight where I, beat a guy and, finished him in the second round. I'm a professional fighter, professional grappler. I run a gym. I fight people in a cage for part of my living, right? That's a crazy thing. And then I'm scared to go do a dancing lesson. I'm nervous about it. I'm intimidated by it. And of course, everything was fine, right? And almost everything always ends up fine. And so I share that with you. Nowadays when I do things, if I'm intimidated by it, if I'm nervous about it, I just kind of go along with it because I expect it to be that way for just about everything. Like I started riding horses recently and getting up onto like a 1,200 pound giant mound of muscle that can sprint off at 30 plus miles an hour. That's intimidating. That's not easy. Plus, you don't know what you're doing. It's super intimidating. But I'm like, yeah, it's supposed to be. I'm doing something new. And so for your friends, for what you could do for them is you can acknowledge that they're intimidated and be like, yeah, everybody is. I was. It's normal. It's completely normal. Everybody's intimidated about anything they do that's new, right? That's just part of how we work. Mm-hmm. But if you're my friend, come with me. I'll help you out. If you live close to them, tell them to come with you. Be their partner for the day, right? And help them out. But again, that's everything that you do in life is going to be intimidating at first. There's no way to circumvent that process. That's sort of your buy-in the beginning. And a lot of times it's usually the toughest part for people. That's why I always say the toughest part is getting started, right? So that would be my advice. And so hopefully some of that helps you. And again, Chris, if you would like to receive a gift, shoot us an email and I will give you a book or a journal. You make your choice to send it to the email. We'll give you one of those.
All right. We got another super chat. We'll answer that one. That's from Kia. Let me see.
Kias.
What is it?
It's Kias. Kias. I don't know how you say that.
Let me.
It's Ki space AS.
What is that picture? Is that a seal?
Looks like a little egg.
Would a fresh BJJ blue belt with some takedowns win most unarmed one-on-one fights?
Yeah. I mean, most likely. I mean, because think about it. So let's think about this. So a lot of times they're in the online communities, right? When they talk about fighting and stuff like that, in a unarmed one-on-one fight, right? People will say, oh, you're not ready for the streets, right? This isn't realistic. This is not whatever. But here's the deal. We have phones, right? We have these phones. And you can basically go on there and you can watch street fights, people getting into street fights. And you'll see typically the complete lack of training that people have for fights, right? They get into fights. Most of the time, the people that can fight, they don't fight because they don't need to, right? They know what they've got and they're able to avoid the situation. But most of the time people get into fights, they can't fight worth a lick. And those that do get into fights with someone with some training, whether it be in any combat sport, it usually goes very poorly for the person who's not trained. And this is true for judo. This is true for jiu-jitsu and wrestling. This is true for boxing, all these different kickboxing, all these combat sports. The one thing that a lot of these have in common and why they're so effective for an actual fight situation is because they do everything they practice in live situations. If they can't do it live, it gets tossed to the side, right? So for instance, in jiu-jitsu, in every one of these arts I just said, like judo, jiu-jitsu, boxing, all that, there's unrealistic aspects to them that we would not engage in a one-on-one fight, right? Because again, we understand that this is not going to be useful to me. If I, like, for instance, I love jiu-jitsu and I do it, but and I play a lot of half guard, but if I was in a fight, I'm not pulling half guard, right? It doesn't take a rocket doctor to understand that. It's not like I'm not going to go roll with a person or fight with a person. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to roll with them and do my half guard sweep. No, I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm going to first try to get out of the situation. And if I have to, I'm going to try to get a takedown, whatever.
100%. Yeah.
And again, you can see these examples over and over and over again. And so what these combat sports, what they have in common is that, sure, aspects of them are unrealistic, right? But what you're doing is you're training a sport that has a martial element nestled inside of it, right? When you take the basics, like for instance, I was actually talking to a guy that I'm going to be doing horse lessons with coming up. He's also he was like a world level judo player. He's this German guy that lives out in Brandenburg,
Yeah. Yeah.
We had him out for the summer. Yeah. Ed. And so Ed was telling me, he was like, yeah, man, he goes, we used to talk about self-defense. He's like, one of the best things for self-defense from a judo standpoint is like a foot trip. He's like, maximum reward, minimum effort. He's like, if I foot trip someone, he's like, I can dump them on the ground. I don't have to really do anything. I don't have to scrape my knees or anything like that. I don't have to supplé him. I don't have to lift him. It's just like, boop, trip you. And so again, it's not just jiu-jitsu and wrestling, but again, if you have wrestling and you have a blue belt background, that means you've probably been going for, let's say, training for at least 2 to 3 years. You're going to have been inundated with people trying to grab you and fight you for 2 to 3 years. You are 100% going to be adequately prepared with takedowns and things like that to do some sort of fight. Now, if it's an untrained person, unarmed person, if the person has a little bit of skill, then things change, right? Especially if the person can pop you, if they know how to box or something like that. But even then, I've had my students, I've done this before where I've had boxers. I did this with the guys a couple years ago. I brought a couple of the boxers over, had them put gloves on, and I had some of my jiu-jitsu guys who have no striking. I gave them a little bit of a quick on-ramp of how to block punches. And I was like, all right, guys, take them down. And the boxers were just trying to stay away from him and punch him.
Yeah.
And again, they weren't able to just stop the takedowns because they weren't used to the engaging that way. And so again, to go back to it, the answer is yes. I'm giving you a long-winded answer, but I feel like you deserve a long-winded answer. You gave me $10. So I appreciate the blessing. And so I want to make sure you get a little bit of something to chew on, a little idea. But with all those sports, all the combat sports, people will say, oh, they're not realistic, right? But what's very 100% real is being engaged in a one-on-one struggle with someone, with people who are actually using their strength, their speed, their athleticism, their energy to try to get you to. What's not realistic is practicing realistic situations in unrealistic ways. Like when you think about people they'll practice these realistic scenarios, but then everything's done at a really slow pace. There's no stress. Your heartbeat's not thumping. All that's not realistic at all. If you go to a competition, sure, there's not a lot of this stuff's not realistic, but you know what is realistic? In a jiu-jitsu competition, having someone come at you 100% and try to choke you, to try to rip you off, try to throw you to the ground, everything else, that's very realistic. And that will prepare you for a situation where if you get into a fight and a human being is coming at you 100%, that will give you a better grip on how to deal with that, opposed to if you practice all these realistic scenarios in very slow, controlled situations, and then all of a sudden one day you got to go out there and you have someone coming at you 100%, your body will be in shock. So just an idea. Oh yeah, Dale Brown. Yeah, old Dusty Dale.
Dusty Dale. Yeah, what about him? He's
hey, all that stuff sucks.
That guy's dangerous.
It's like one of those things where, again, I mean, maybe there's something to it, but when you look a lot of that stuff, I'm looking at it, I'm like, man, I want to see that done on someone live. I'm like, because there's one where he was just kicking his little foot and the guy fell over. I'm like, who's going to do that? Who falls over like that? Has anybody like, and I see people like saying, this is great. I'm like, have any of you ever been in a fight? Have you ever seen a fight happen in real life? Like this would not work.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's like one of those things where remember they did the Dimmock stuff. They went to the jiu-jitsu school. And they did the Dimmock. It's like, don't do that. Like same thing. Go do a jiu-jitsu gym and just like let them come at you live and then try it. It ain't gonna work.
Or do like the gun and he just goes to the side.
Yeah,
I was like, oh, you're gonna.
And by the way, for the person that just did the super chat,
kiosk.
I'll send you a book or journal. Let me know what you want. Send us an email to the email that Eugene put up earlier, the Chewjitsu Podcast email for Gmail.
Yep. The Chewjitsu Podcast at gmail.com. So, all right, we got one from Southern Discomfort. Chewy. Well, I already know the answer to this one. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about a white belt using the truck and the submissions within it in competition?
How do you think I'm going to answer that?
Well, first of all, that's one of the positions that's one of your go-tos. Now, my question, I guess, for clarification is submissions within that. Are you talking about like controlling one of the legs, like I guess I have like call it crotch ripper?
Crotch ripper, yeah. There's the crotch ripper, the vaporizer.
Yeah,
a calf slicer.
You use it to take the back, but I think
so. There's a lot of submissions from there. Here's my deal with white belts doing submissions. I really like, for instance, in the gym, the only real restriction that I'm doing with them is like at the gym right now is I'm starting to put no heel hooks for white belts unless they're doing a class that specifically worked on heel hooks. Because then everybody knows that, hey, heel hooks is going to be this thing we're working on today. So during some situational rolling, it's okay. They can work on it because I want them to have some control of it. But with a submission, I really don't have too many like qualms about teaching white belts everything, right? I want them to know as much as possible. And so whether they're doing wrist locks, whether they're doing a knee slicer or a calf slicer from the position, I'm okay with it as long as they understand the controls and how much pressure should be applied and everything else. And so, our white belts at the gym, first off, my white belts tend to be white belts for a while. I don't allow them to, if you get a blue belt under me, you've been training with me for a bit. I do that on purpose because I want them to have some time to spin at that belt before we move them on. Because I want them to be a good blue belt. I want them to be secure in that position once they get it. But I don't care. So if a white belt was using a truck or whatever, I'm fine with it. In competition, it may not be the best thing because obviously a lot of submissions for white belts are going to be limited. So in training, I'm okay with it. And in competition, I'm going to be like, obviously they couldn't do it. If the tournament was like, here's the other, maybe the way you're phrasing this. If I had a tournament, let's say, okay, if I had a tournament, would I allow white belts to have access to those submissions? And the answer is probably no. And the reason why is like, I don't mind training, but competition is a different amped up level that people get to. And I would be worried about the possible issues that could happen. In training, things can be a little bit more controlled. And the reason why I say this, I remember there was a tournament that happened back when I was a white belt, right? Or I was a fresh blue belt. It was up in Ohio, and the Ohio tournament, basically there was no restrictions for white belts. Heel hooks were legal. And it was and again, this is 2004. So it wasn't like people were using heel hooks that much, but a lot of MMA guys would use them. And again, the sort of the thought on those were is that you didn't have a lot of control. So you got to sit back and you got to rip them. Right. And people's defense wasn't very good with them either. So, it was, especially these white belts, these are new people. So they were sitting back on heel hooks and just ripping. And you just saw, I felt like, man, like there's some orthopedic surgeon that was just, watching the money roll in that day,
yeah.
It was crazy. So I wouldn't allow, I think it's a good thing to limit white belt submissions a bit, because I think that, again, it's one of those things where you get in there and let's say if you have a really well-trained white belt who gets in there and maybe they have control, but then you have other white belts that don't have control or are very inexperienced about certain positions, I wouldn't want them to get hurt. So I think it's good to limit submissions to a certain degree at some of the belt levels to make sure that you're sort of just keeping the playing field as safe as possible, because again, there's going to be differences in the way that people train in their experience levels. So again, thank you for the super chat. And if you would like it's
from Southern Discomfort.
Southern Discomfort. That's fun. We'll give away I'll give away another book or journal. Send us an email and we'll hook you up.
All right. So we've given away something to Anjum, Joe, Nielsen, Chris C, Kiaz, and then Southern Discomfort.
Okay.
So
next one, we'll give out a rehab course.
All right. So I'm gonna we got another super chat. Let's answer that one. Okay. But there was a good injury question that I want to get to from Mike. I'm gonna answer that with him. But this is from Kada Gersoy. Let's show it.
Coda.
Sorry, Coda. My bad. Coda. Hi, I'm a small 18-year-old purple belt, 5'4", 110 pounds, having trouble with most takedowns. Is there a type of takedown that might help, or do I need to get bigger?
That's a good question. That's going to depend on how big the people are that you're rolling with. You know, if you're going with so here's an example. If you're going with people that are like 200 pounds, I'm probably going to tell you to pull guard. I mean, like maybe you can go for a takedown, but again, there's a certain point where simply the size difference is just going to be too much. You know what I mean? It's like, unless you're like some really, really good wrestler and you can negate that with technique a little bit to some degree, there's going to be a point where you're just going to have to accept the physical limitations and play guard and be a really badass guard player. And you can be a little bit more effective that way. But there are takedowns that don't require a ton of size. Things like slide bys with like a foot trip, those are great takedowns. You see a lot more of those in jiu-jitsu, foot trips and slide bys. Because again, you don't have to be a big monster to do those. Those are very finesse-based takedowns. And that's what you would want to look for. If your takedowns are something that you're getting interested in, I have a student who's he's a big guy, but he was not a very big heavyweight. And so he had to kind of wrestle with a lot of finesse. His name's Brandon. You'll see, if you go to my Instagram, you'll probably see me and him sharing videos and stuff like that. You can check out some of his stuff, and he has some good videos on that slide by and some of those foot trips. But basically, aside from that, with those foot trips and things like that, I would basically look at, if I was you, right? And this is what I've done in different periods of time. We'll kind of talk about it that way. Whenever I'm looking for certain things for my game, I'll try to go and find people that look like me, that are shaped like me, that sort of, have a similar build. And I'll try to find their stuff and say, okay, well, what do they do? Because again, at the end of the day, jiu-jitsu, grappling, all of it, a lot of it is going to be dictated by your body, right? Your physical anatomy. It's going to play a big role. I mean, like for instance, you may not be very effective with triangles if you don't have long legs. I have a student named Matt who has a disgustingly good triangle. You can look at Matt in about a half a second. You're going to realize that Matt's going to have good triangles. He's friggin' built for them. There's other things like for me, I'm not very good with Darce chokes. I don't have long arms, and I've also got arms that have been lifting weights for a long time. So I've got extra meat in there. So I can do a Darce choke if I need to, but it's not my main go-to. Whereas there's things like Kimuras and rear naked chokes and things like that that make use of these little short arms that can get right into where they need to be very effectively. And so what I would tell you to do, Coda, is maybe go in along with, like I said, I think the foot trip and using slide bys are great finesse moves that you can use. But go and look up people that, it's like homework for your grappling. Go look up people that are a bit smaller that use takedowns. So go look up wrestlers and watch what they do. And you can start to look for trends. Or you find all these little small wrestlers doing a particular takedown. And sometimes that'll give you insight into maybe what you could do for yourself. And in jiu-jitsu, a lot of times we have absolute divisions, which is not common. Like they don't do an absolute division in the Olympic wrestling, right? That's not a thing. But in jiu-jitsu, we do have absolute divisions, and you can go see if there's smaller grapplers that have a particular takedown that they use against larger grapplers, and kind of do your homework, and you'll probably find a trend where, this seems to be something that's happening more and more. But again, my encouragement would be to find wrestlers or takedown artists that do things really well, that are about the same size as you, or at least comparable, again, being a size, and then go from there and then go down the rabbit hole. If you see everybody doing a particular technique, go down the rabbit hole and really learn that technique. And again, thank you for the super chat. And if you would like to get a rehab course from Eugene, send the email up to the podcast email.
Chewjitsu@gmail.com. And what do you think about
and did you want to do the injury one? What you're saying?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what do you think about ankle picks for smaller?
Great. For smaller ankle picks can be great.
Yeah, I was thinking that, and that's one of the things when you're talking about Brandon, who's he's a big guy, but like you said, he wrestled a lot against guys that were way bigger, because he was I guess in the heavyweight division, and he ankle picks were one of his go-tos.
Yep.
And seemed like, you can kind of, if you're quick with it, you can kind of, get down pretty quick and get to the foot. This question I wanted to answer was from Mike Nichols, and he says, the 10th Planet Blue Belt here recently fractured collarbone that required surgery. Cleared to return to training recently after 3 months of recovery. Any advice on returning after a crucial injury? Thanks.
So you give me your thoughts on it. I'll give you mine afterwards. But from a PT, like an actual doctor of physical therapy that knows how the body works better than just about anybody, what would you recommend?
So an injury like this, when you're looking at the collarbone, they usually put a plate in there. And so you think no big deal, right? But a lot of times, anytime you put pressure on your shoulder or you plant or use your arm, use a lot of function of your arm. Sometimes you'll lose range of motion, you lose neck mobility, you lose a lot of strength. So I think, obviously once everything's healed up and nice and healed for the surgical area, then you got to look at all these other areas, make sure that, look at your mid back, look at all your mobility and stuff, make sure you have full range of motion, and then your pain is well controlled. And then your strength should be for the legs. We say, like, if you say you had an ACL tear, your injured side should be at least 90% strength. So if you can single leg squat, say you have a leg press machine, you can do 100 on one, you should be able to do on your injured side, or your recovery side, you should be able to do 90%. That may be, you may test that certain number of ways. You could do like a dumbbell bench presses, or maybe even if you don't want to max out, you do like a rep. Like I'm going to do 25 pounds, whatever. Yeah. So you want to be at least 90% there, full range of motion. And then like the another thing is integrating back in. You can kind of talk about that a little bit, but again, essentially you have this disconnection between like your blue belt physical skill and your blue belt mental skill. Like in your head, you can still do everything that you used to be able to do before your injury, but it's not really the case. There's almost like a lag to your recovery, like to your crispness of your movement. So start back slow. It would be maybe drilling, then positional sparring, keeping somebody around your size. You don't want anybody really flattening you out, putting a bunch of pressure on you, and then kind of build your way up. But you got to go based on feel. There's not like a really like set, schedule or returning.
Yeah, I would stick kind of to go along with that. I see that a lot of times when I've had students that try to rush back into training after an injury, they tend to re-injure themselves, right? And so my encouragement to you would be that, take your time to do all the rehab stuff you got to do and give it plenty of time to where you really feel good, to come back. And then when you do, start with technique and drilling, no rolling. I know that's hard. It's like, having dessert in front of you and not eating it. But again, it's what you need to do, because a lot of times I've always had this experience too. What ends up happening is when I go back to training, I feel about like the same person, right? But then when I get on the mat, I'm just late on everything. Like my timing's off. I see the opportunities that I should be, taking, but then it's like I'm lagging behind. And I remember even coming back one time and like trying to push it. I was younger, right? So I came back too quick, and I remember like planting my face on the mat because I was getting swept, and it was like I felt myself getting swept, and I knew that I was supposed to post my hand out, but instead of doing that, it was just like, I recognized that I should have done that, but instead I didn't. And I just bonk right on my face. And as a great example of that lag that was happening. And so my encouragement to you would be to be smart about it and make a pre-commitment. So the idea of pre-commitment is essentially that if we do things, let's say, for instance, you have someone that's dieting, right? If that person wants to diet and they want to eat a good meal throughout the day and they struggle with this, right? Something that's very tough for them to do. They've shown that the person will be more successful if they make a pre-commitment early on. So let's say that you basically say to yourself, I'm going to eat these meals this time of day or whatever, and you make a plan out. You're more likely to stick to that plan when in the moment you have to make a decision of whether you're going to go eat junk food and fast food or you're going to diet, right? Because you made the pre-commitment when you were in sort of a nice, relaxed, present state of mind. So before you step foot in that gym, my encouragement would be to sit down and just like pull out a calendar, pull out a piece of like note paper, whatever you want to do, and say, okay, week 1, I'm going to drill on Monday, Tuesday, whatever your days are for training. I'm going to do that for 2 weeks. And then 3 weeks, if I'm feeling good, okay, cool. Then I'm going to do situational rolling with, Bob, who knows how to flow roll. And I'm only going to do 2 rounds the first couple of days to see how I feel. And then build up from there. Basically, whatever arbitrary sort of number you feel, I would sort of space it out, especially if it was a bad injury, space it out over the course of like 6 to 10 weeks to where basically you slowly ramp up, and just write it down in a notebook and give yourself a plan. This way, when you go to the gym, when you get to that point and you get done rolling and your body is getting that initial desire to want to roll, you can go back to, oh, I made my plan. I'm not going to roll today, because it's so easy to just say, you know what? I feel okay. Let me just go ahead and roll a little bit today. And then boom, you get re-injured. And then now you're back on the shelf for another 3 to 4 to 5 months or more. And so that would be my encouragement. That's what I actually did my last time that I went under the knife and had a surgery. When I got done, I sat down at my desk and I wrote out basically it was like a 12-week plan of like rehabbing and then introductory back to rolling. I wrote it all out. And so, and the reason why I did that was because I went under the knife primarily because I got injured because I was trying to push myself after getting injured too fast. And so it's a mistake I made. I learned from it. I wrote out for a 12-week plan, and my recovery from that one was great. And so that would be my encouragement to you, brother.
All right.
And again, if you want to get the rehab, which could be helpful to you, rehab course, send us an email and Eugene will hook you up.
Yeah, just check you. I'll let you know kind of what course I have. You can kind of pick something out there. Here's a good one, Chewy, from Ambitious Hacks. So what workouts do you recommend to do to enhance your cardio and fitness with BJJ?
Jiu-jitsu.
I've heard that, but I've also heard people
I'll give you some stuff.
Poo-poo against that. Like it's like, well, do you just need to strength train? Like, or do you just need to do jiu-jitsu to get better at jiu-jitsu, or is there other things?
Yeah, there's
like the cardio. Yeah.
So I mean, okay, again, so basically, like, you got to understand there's one, the more you train jiu-jitsu, drilling, here's an example. If you drill a lot, you will become more efficient with your moves and you use less energy to do the same movement, right? So the more jiu-jitsu you do, the more efficient you become and you use less energy. That's why it's really important. It's not just about your physical fitness. It's about like you becoming more and more exposed to the art, and that you get better because you don't have to use as much energy. That said, if you were trying to increase your ability to perform better on the mat, the thing that's always helped me, this is what's helped me the most, again, I can't speak for whatever, is trying to work my body out in different ways that I don't do when I'm on the mat, especially because I'm training a lot. If you train like once or twice a week, it's maybe not that big of a deal. But like a lot of times what happens is people they work their body out in jiu-jitsu a certain way, and then when they get off the mats, they just want to do the same stuff over and over again. And so it's like they try to mimic everything about jiu-jitsu. So they'll get off the mats. Their strength training is like these weird movements to mimic jiu-jitsu. And on top of that, when they let's say they do cardio, instead of doing, say, steady state long cardio that's going to just, basically that rhythmic type of cardio that can increase your cardiovascular system, you're going to go back to doing intervals, which again mimics the training that you do in jiu-jitsu, where you're having these constant ups and downs and everything else. So my encouragement is, if you're training jiu-jitsu several times a week and you're trying to give yourself a little boost, my encouragement would be to exercise the different systems in your body, right? So for instance, like when I do cardio, I do long, steady state cardio for like 40 minutes or something, maybe, or so, depends on what I'm doing. I'll get on a bike or a jog or whatever is that I want to do. And I have that steady state, and I'll typically wear into a particular zone that's right for my age, right? So I've got it there. And so I'm doing that steady state cardio. And again, whether I'm running, whether I'm doing the steady state cardio, I always notice a difference from that. Even when I was fighting back in the day, I remember I'd go run miles, just get my miles in. And I remember I always had better cardio when I did that. Now, if I want to sort of do some real intense stuff, I'll do some hill sprints for that, like that sort of scrambling, that high end sort of raising my top end, my sort of your VO2 max, right? And I would do the hill sprints. But again, you don't have to do a ton, because again, that stuff's really taxing on your body. Steady state cardio is relatively easy for the most part because you're not going that hard. But when you start doing really brutal cardio sessions, it's really taxing on your energies, on your body. And again, if you're trying to train throughout it, you don't want to continue to batter the same the body in the same way that you're doing all week long, because your body's trying to recover at the same time. And then with strength training, when you have a stronger, more conditioned muscle, that's going to be a benefit. Again, like if you have someone that's like has a well-conditioned muscle that can bench press, 225 like a bunch of times or something like that. Just an example, not that a bench press is a great idea, or let's say squat 225, they can squat it 20 times, no problem. That person's going to be in good shape when they're on their feet wrestling and having to use leg power or something like that, right? Opposed to someone that doesn't lift. And so that would be my idea. It would be, one is to incorporate some steady state cardio into the mix. And then again, add some lifting into it, because those two things I think has always worked great for me. And again, you don't want to go bananas with it, especially if you're getting ready for a competition and you want to do a little extra hard cardio, that's okay. But if you're not actively getting ready for a competition, don't try to kill yourself, because then again, you will become more efficient and you'll get better cardio over time. But if you try to go too hard, too fast, you'll end up running into injuries and you'll basically just chew your body up too quickly. And again, I just say that because I think sometimes it's one of those things where someone asked me the other day, they said, can you take jiu-jitsu too seriously? I'm like 100%. Like if you get too wrapped up into it, like put it into perspective. What are you doing this for? Are you doing this to be a world champion competitor? Or are you doing this to be like a 35-year-old hobbyist that basically does this to blow off steam after work before they go see their kids, right? It's like, remember why you're doing this. Again, and I get it, because a lot of times we take this type A personality that we a lot of times are as driven people. We take it to where everything that we do, but we got to be careful. It's like, again, I'm just going back to this because I'm very much like a white belt in like horse riding right now, right? When I'm riding the horse, when I'm doing that stuff, I can't take my jiu-jitsu mentality towards it. I want to be good at it. I like doing it. I find it really enjoyable, but I can't take that jiu-jitsu mentality, or I'm going to train 6 days a week. And I don't have time for that. I'm never going to be a great rider. I'm never going to be a world champion rider, right? I'm not trying to be. I'm just doing this because I enjoy it. And so again, sometimes you have to be careful about it, because it can be really easy to start trying to mimic like competitor type training schedules when you're like not in that kind of shape, or you're brand new, or you're not a competitor. And if you are a person who wants to be a competitor someday, understand that it took years for that person typically to get to that level of conditioning where their body can take on that training load. Again, I remember, like, here's just a quick example, and then we'll kind of get off. I know I'm always rambling, but when I started doing jiu-jitsu full time back in 2010, and I was training like every single day, my body was wrecked for like 3 months because I was not used to like being on the mats that much. Like now I was on the mats almost every single day. And again, I'm in my mid 20s, early 20s, 24 at the time. So I had a young body. I was in great shape. And I all of a sudden did this. I was like, whoa, man. And like now I can be on the mats every day, no problem. It doesn't bother me. But it took me years to be able to condition my body to be able to do that workload. And so again, understand that you're working towards a goal, but don't forget that your body has to stay intact for you to do that. And I'm not saying that you're guilty of this. I'm just saying that a lot of people sometimes want to push the envelope so fast, so quickly, that they don't give themselves adequate time to adjust.
Chewy, I think it's a lot of great points, honestly, like, because people want to, I want to get better at jiu-jitsu. So what they do is they do stuff that mimics jiu-jitsu. But if you already do jiu-jitsu every day, you don't need to do that. You need to do the opposite of it to kind of correct some of those things where, so you're trying to avoid overuse injuries and things like that. So I think it's a great point. I mean, I think, yes, in some instances you want to maybe work those movement patterns, but you got to be mindful not to overdo it, because then you're going to get into those overuse patterns, and then it's going to have a bad effect, not the effect you want. And the steady state, like, I found that when I ran like 2 miles a day, or not a day, like a couple days a week, it really helped my cardio. I felt like I just felt like my capacity to move, to work, to train was better.
Yeah, you're strengthening the heart's ability to kind of keep the thing pumping. And so when you think about when you're just moving around on the mats during those periods where you're not scrambling, that energy system's keeping the thing working. And the whole idea about, we talked about, like with Andy Galpin about this on the podcast, years ago. If you're a novice in lifting, your best bet is a well-rounded strength training program, because it will strengthen your body, help prevent injuries, and do all these different things. If you are a high-level athlete, that's when you can get into a little bit more specialization as far as your workout routines to mimic your sport. But if you do not have a strong base under you of like years of lifting, then your best bet, again, is to go towards first a well-rounded strength training program to build your body up first, and then you go into other stuff. But again, steady state cardio, add some strength training in on top of your jiu-jitsu. That's the short answer to my long-winded ramble.
Yeah. And so that's from Ambitious. Do we have any more stuff to give away? That's from Ambitious Hacks.
Ambitious. So Ambitious, send us an email, and we'll give you I'll give you one of my courses. So
all right. We
still have a tinge or two.
Yeah, we got a couple of good questions. Here's a super chat.
Mike
Nichols said, thanks for the feedback. It wasn't a question.
Appreciate it. Well, if you have a question, Mike, let us know. But otherwise, thank you for the super chat. Appreciate the blessings, brother.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you, Mike. There it is right there. Mike Nichols says, thank you for the feedback. Great content. All right. Now, there was one that I saw. I wanted to ask you about, but now I can't find it. It was a pretty good one here. Let's see. Should we see if you find one? Man, where was it? So it's something about like 2 stripe white belts, not being able to, not competing or maybe not rolling. I think, I don't know if like some gyms will keep white belts. They won't let them roll, like full rolling, until they reach a certain stripe level, I
guess.
You
mean like people not being able to? Oh, here we go. I think it's I think it's from King of Pringles.
King of Pringles.
King of Pringles.
Right. Very good. I'll find them.
Bro, I used to love Pringle chips.
Yeah, there you go. I'll read it right there. Go ahead, Chewy.
So King of Pringles says, "What do you think about white belts waiting until they have 2 stripes before they roll?" So King of Pringles, thank you for the question. So I guess it really depends on. First off, let's think about this, right? So the big advantage that you would have to giving that person some extra time under their belt before they roll is that you help potentially reduce the risk of injury. That's the idea, right? The other side is that, again, for me, like if I had to wait to roll, I probably wouldn't have stuck with jiu-jitsu. I probably would have been bored. Like I want to do this. I want to get, like, the thing that like hooked me, like hook, line, and sinker, was when I rolled with someone that had experience. I couldn't do anything to them. But I came from a wrestling background and I thought I was going to be good. So again, it was not everybody sort of needs that wake up call. A lot of times I kind of play it by ear. Like if I have someone that's really new, inexperienced, very unathletic, I'm like, hey, why don't you just train for like 10 classes and whatever, that sort of thing. And then also in the gym, like if we have someone that's new, we're like, hey, we don't do arm bars in the sky. We keep the submissions basically limited to either some or none. And also a lot of times with the white belts, when they're brand new, they don't do any rolling outside of the position they just worked. So a lot of times, like with the brand new white belts, we have like a beginner class. And so they go to the beginner class and they will only do situational rolling. So if they worked on a guard pass, they will only be in the guard trying to work that guard pass and nothing else, just so that they can get some experience and kind of feel that thing that, again, when we get down to it, what do we love the most in jiu-jitsu for the most part? We love rolling. Rolling's the best part. It's the most fun part to us all, right? We all love it. We love the techniques and everything else, but when we get to roll and go after each other, it's so much fun. And so I want them to experience that as early as possible for me. And so we just let them do situational rolling, and that cuts down on a lot of the injuries. There's like very few injuries that I've had with new white belts because they're just sticking into this little sliver of jiu-jitsu, and they don't have, because what ends up happening most of the time, especially with white belts, the injuries happen when they don't know what to do and they try something and they zig when they should zag and they make a mistake. But when you keep them contained to a little space, then they can't do that, right? They have to stay there and they have to work from the position. And so I don't necessarily like the idea of making the person wait for a really long time or like, months before they roll. Sometimes it's necessary depending on the situation. Maybe they had prior injuries. Maybe they're a bit older. Maybe they have some reservations. Like I've had like women with trauma issues before. I'm like, hey, you take your time and you do it when you're ready, right? There's always those situations. But as a whole, I typically let people roll. We just contain it in a very specific space. And I think that also helps them learn the techniques better, because a lot of times it gives a context. Because again, if you're learning something, but then you don't understand why you're trying to learn it, it's very hard to, like, sometimes for some people, at least for me, it's hard to put it together. But then when like I do something and then like I try to actually use it, it's like, oh, that's why I'm supposed to do X, Y, or Z, right? Okay. It makes sense to me now. And so, without getting your hands dirty, so to speak, I think that sometimes the learning process doesn't happen as efficiently. And so that's why I tend to let the people roll earlier. We just kind of keep it contained. And then if you have someone that has prior experience, like they're a really good wrestler or whatever, then again, you can even take off even more restraints, because obviously that person maybe hasn't done jiu-jitsu, but they've grappled, and their body will be, very easily able to acclimate to jiu-jitsu. So I don't particularly like waiting until they get there. I've even seen some gyms where they have like a different colored belt for like the new guys. Like you have to get your belt, like a white blue belt or something. I think it's at some of the Gracie gyms. It's not my thing, but I can see where it has advantages, but I think you can mitigate the risk of injury by keeping people contained. And to you for your question, King of Pringles, if you'd like a free CBD tincture, if it's legal where you're at, send us an email. If it's not legal where you are, then let us know and we'll send you something else.
By the way, Mike had already asked a question, so
he was
just giving us some love. So
okay,
I have a question for you, Chewy, and this is kind of since there's a.
I'm not giving you a gift, Eugene.
No, I don't need a gift. Gift me every day, whoop my ass. So there's a lot of like comments going on about like being older grapplers starting late, this and that. Some people like, I'm too old to start, or I'm a hobbyist, this and that. What do you think? And this has a lot of layers to it. What do you think is like the oldest someone could maybe start and still maybe be a world champion, or that of that somebody started late? Now it's getting a lot earlier.
When we say world champion, are we talking about like,
let's say IBJJF,
like adult or masters? Because see, that's the thing. So because here's the deal, like in jiu-jitsu, we have mastery divisions.
Let's say adult.
But so if we're talking about adult, we're talking about the best adult, right? I mean, now
it's probably,
I mean, you're
10.
you're talking about, you're talking, you got into it when you're probably like somewhere in your teens, maybe a little bit earlier, maybe a little bit later, because I mean, like obviously there's Gordon Ryan who, he was younger, but he wasn't like 6. Right. Yeah. I see. This is the thing I do wonder about. So there's a book called The Sports Gene, and they were talking about in this book, the whole idea is that a lot of times we ascribe everything to the 10,000 hour type rule. You got to put in your 10,000 hours. By the way, if you actually look up some of the guys who did some of those studies, like Dr. Anders Ericsson and stuff, and some of these other guys, they actually wrote books about it. And they were like, Malcolm Gladwell kind of got like, he didn't actually take our studies that we did exactly right. Like, it's not this exact 10,000 hour thing. And it really comes down to the specific type of training, right? Like, so as an example, they talked about swimmers who, swimmers would go into, to the pool and swim. And they did these surveys with these different swimmers. And one of the things that they found was with the highest level swimmers versus the like good swimmers that were high level, but not at the highest level. They said that one of the things that was different was when those high level swimmers were going, they were like 100% wrapped up. And every time that they would move and they did a repetition, they were trying to keep their body in sync and see how it feels. Whereas people that were kind of they were still really good, they were putting their reps in, but they were just kind of going with emotions. They weren't really that focused. Right. And so you can think about that even in a jiu-jitsu situation where like people come in and they're kind of bullshitting around as they're doing the reps. Like they're talking, having a conversation, they're having a good time, they're relaxed, and that is okay. Completely okay. But if you're trying to be the best, you got to be focused on your damn reps. You got to be focused on how your body feels and every little thing that happens, and 100% focus. The thing is, that takes a lot of energy to do. You're taking your mind and really working it, and the brain's eating up a lot of calories to make sure you're staying focused. And so with their studies, they were saying, like, again, in that kind of stuff, it's not necessarily 10,000 hours. It's about the type of hours you're putting in, the specificity of your training and how you do it. Now, that said, in the Sports Gene, the guy brings up, and again, this is not necessarily wrong or right. These are just ideas. Basically, he was bringing up all these examples of people where they completely bypassed these long training examples by essentially being built for a sport. And if you look at certain sports have certain physical criterias that will lend themselves to making you an effective player. An example is with like American basketball, right? Or just basketball. We don't have that issue with football, soccer. But with basketball, they found that it wasn't just height. Height was like, because everybody thinks you used to be really tall. Well, not exactly. It's like you need to be tall, but you also need to have there's a ratio of your arm length in relation to your height. So you have to have
in basketball. Yeah.
You have to have extraordinarily long arms for your height, and you have to have a good vertical jump. They said those two things, your arm length and your vertical jump, were better dictators as to whether or not you would be a good basketball player, just off physical things alone. And they were like using people like Muggsy Bogues back in the day, who was a little short guy, but he had these really long arms and he had a great vertical jump, right? And so they were also showing that there were these different groups of people that lived in certain countries who were really tall, but they weren't good at basketball, but they had kind of short arms, relatively to this ratio. And so, some of that I think comes down to too, is some people are probably built for jiu-jitsu. Some people are either built for it or they have a mind for it, and some people don't. You know what I mean? I think there's going to be an element to that we'll wake up to at some point and be like, look, like everybody can be good at it, but like world champions, there's going to be something that they have that some of us don't. And I don't know what that is, but just sort of curiosity. But as far as like becoming a world champion at an adult level, I think for most people, it's going to be one of those things where you're probably going to have to be in it at your teens. Or somewhere around before, and that's where you're gonna have to start. And I think for a number of reasons. One, your body's still very young and youthful and new and everything else. But one of the things I think about is your ability to focus on something. The older you get, the less time that you have to focus on like an activity like that.
Yeah.
You know, because you start having jobs, you have careers, you have families, all that stuff. Whereas when you're in your teens, bro, you can go all in. You know, in your early 20s, same thing. You can go all in because you have very few responsibilities and you have so much more bandwidth that can be, you know, attributed to that. What are we doing?
Oh, nothing. The Army Mikey Mike. He gave us
oh, what's up, Mike?
He said
I want you guys to split this.
Yeah.
All right, Grandpa. Jesus. $1.99. Well, he did pay for the UFC fight. So when Army Mike came to the camp this past year, and we were trying to watch the fights, the Kamaru Usman fight with what was the guy's name? The
Usman and
British guy.
Leon Edwards.
Leon Edwards, yeah. And so they
Leon. Come on, Leon.
Yeah. Come on, Rock. And then and so Mike, he came to the camp, and then afterwards he paid for it. So appreciate that blessing. I'll split it with Eugene here. We'll go buy like a pack of gum or something.
Yeah. And somebody asked, something we can't even get buy a pack of gum. Somebody asked, what's the like?
You can't buy a pack of gum for $9.99?
No.
Yeah, yes, you can. Like a little pack.
25 cents. I don't know. I'm not buying those. Those like lose the flavor in like 10 seconds.
Hold on. There we go. All right.
We already asked this question. Is it Icenic? Icon? What is that? Anyway, what's the best body type for jiu-jitsu? I'm average height with short arms and legs. That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
Me, bro. Like, I mean, I'm like 6 foot, so I'm slightly above average, but I've got shorter arms, and I got like short, kind of thick legs. Not short, but just shorter. There is no best body type, I don't think. I mean, you typically see that like a lot of times a longer, sort of lankier body tends to present a lot of benefits, and you see a lot of people that have that thinner body in jiu-jitsu tend to do pretty well. But that said, there's plenty of really good jiu-jitsu practitioners that are short and stocky and everything else. And so I don't necessarily think that there's one body type that's going to be better for any of them. I think it really comes down to your ability to adapt everything. And again, your technique selection will probably be determined by that. Like, you're probably going to favor things like half guard, probably going to favor things like kimuras, maybe rear naked chokes or guillotine chokes. Those can be great for shorter arms too. So some of your technique selection is going to be, sort of dictated by that. But I don't think your ability to be good at jiu-jitsu and be effective is dictated, because trust me, I've seen just about any shape or size person in jiu-jitsu be good at it. So that said, I think that one of the things that you do see with a lot of high-level jiu-jitsu practitioners, especially now, is that their body fat's also very low. Like you look at, they're in good shape. You know what I mean? So it doesn't matter so much that they're short, stocky, average, or whatever, but they can't be lugging around a ton of weight.
Yeah.
Unless you're like heavyweight, it doesn't matter. But like if you're talking about like the guys at other weights, like they're not carrying around a lot of extra fluff, and so that tends to mean that they get a little bit more on the thin side, opposed to like, say, some super jacked monster or something else, right?
I think the beautiful thing about jiu-jitsu is that there's different games for different body types and different body styles. You got guys like Mikey Musumeci, who's got these tiny little legs, and his torso's kind of bit long. Dude,
his torso's really long.
It's really weird. His legs are so short. And then you've got like,
he's got that swimmer body.
Yeah, he does. Like Michael Phelps was built like that.
Got short legs.
Yeah. So I just think that, like, if you're somebody like, we talk about Matt at our gym, who has great triangles, also does a lot with buggy chokes, so that's a game you're probably not gonna be able to play, Chewy. You play a half guard, that type of game. So I think the beautiful thing about jiu-jitsu is you can be, and they have weight classes, so you got different, body types, like bigger guys, like you said, more body fat, larger. The ultra heavy, like the super heavy, I guess they do. Some of the guys do really well if they can move a little bit as a big guy or a big person. I think that's one of those things too. And
I mean, yeah, and the thing, like, when it boils down to, is jiu-jitsu is kind of a choose your own adventure, right? So, I mean, if you work at it enough, you can make it work.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, have fun with it. Have fun with the idea of going out there and like finding the stuff that works for you. I Scenic Wolf, send us a message, and I'll send you a course. So send an email, let us know, say I want a course or whatever in the email, and we'll take care of you.
All and right, then let's do maybe a couple more, Chew, like one or two more.
We'll wind down.
Yeah, we've been on it for, guys, like, it's so funny. Like, the technical difficulties just keep coming. Like, my mouse has died and stuff, and it's just great.
It's your day, buddy.
It's been good. It's been really good. Like, we need to do these more often.
Get it together.
Get it together. That's right. So let's find another one, Chewy. What do you think?
Find another one.
Oh, it's my job.
Yeah, you're doing a good job of bringing it up.
All right, let me see. Body type best. I don't know. I don't know what body type is, but let me see.
Go to the very bottom real quick.
Very bottom. I'm there.
Malik. I think it says a little bit down, further down.
This one.
Yeah.
Is it? You want to click that one?
Yeah, click that one. So the message comes from Malik Williams. Says, Chew, I sent you a video with 2 juveniles, one using what seemed like dirty techniques. So they sent me a video the other day, and it's weird. So I was watching the match, and you see this, like, these 2 little girls, like, young, they look like they're maybe like 10 or something. And one of the little girls, like, raises up, and, like, she's in, like, the top of half guard, and the young girl below her is holding one, and she just gets up and she starts grinding. She drops her forearm, like, her elbow right on her mouth, and she's just grinding it. And he sent me kind of like what I was thinking about, and I thought it was dirty. I was like, I didn't like it. Like, if I was the coach, so here's an example. It hasn't happened often, but I've gotten pissed at my students for doing stuff that I don't think is very nice, or it's kind of uncouth. I'm okay with using a little bit of pain or discomfort for a technical means, and I've talked about that many times on the channel. But just to sit there like she was and grind it down, like, if I was her coach, I'd be yelling at him, like, stop, stop it, like 10. I'll show you the video afterwards. It's like, it sucks. It's like, because I just look at that little girl, and she's just laying there getting her face, like, raked over, and the ref doesn't say anything. I feel like the ref should have said something. But this younger girl, so here's one that happened years ago. Is like, I had a guy who he had trained with me for a couple months. He was an MMA fighter, and he was in the match, and he was just, like, sitting inside someone's guard, and he was just covering the guy's mouth. So, like, he wasn't trying to posture up and pass. He was just sitting there covering the person's mouth. And I was telling him, I was like, bro, stop covering the mouth, posture up, let's break that guard, whatever else. I'm trying to coach him. And he just, like, looked at me, but he wouldn't listen. He didn't do it. So I coached the other opponent and helped him armbar him. I was like,
wait, what?
Yeah. So I was like, you're not going to listen to me. You should be passing guard. So I was like, hey, guy on the bottom. I was like, all right, here's what I want you to do. So then I'm, like, coaching him. And I was like, well, I'm going to help you coach him and armbar him because he's not listening to me. And it's like, he's doing stupid stuff.
Did he leave our gym? This person in our gym?
No, he stuck with us for a little bit longer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would have been like, man,
I was like, well, listen.
I think he panicked.
No, he just, like, he did fought MMA. He's just doing dirty stuff. Because, it's in the MMA, you do dirty stuff. It's like, but this is a jiu-jitsu tournament. I want to see technique. And we just worked his guard pass. I was very angry. I was like, all right, let's armbar. Let's turn your hips, whatever, And so I was trying to help him. And so, like, I don't like an MMA fight. All bets are off, right? We have both signed this. We literally have signed this piece of paper that says we're both okay with maximum amounts of violence inside these confines of these rules. In jiu-jitsu, I don't like seeing, especially with kids, just getting grinded down, beat up and stuff like that, because, again, it's not technique. It's not good finesse. It's not. And again, technically it's against the rules, because you're starting to get into the territory of striking and doing, like, that kind of stuff, opposed to actually doing a technique, you know? And so, again, it was one of those things where it can be a little ambiguous, because there was a strike that came down once, and it looks like the ref stopped it for a second, and then they just kind of continued to grind and they're pushing their elbow into it. But there was a couple times she would drop her and, like, lift her up, and I don't. If I was a ref, I would say, hey, like, we need to see something else on top or something like that before I give him a warning, and eventually probably, like, get a DQ to him. Again, but that's just the discretion of the ref. But again, it's just one of those things where I didn't like it.
Not illegal, though. I mean,
it was one of those things, man, where it's like, maybe not. So again, it's just one of those things where, but if I was a ref, I would have, like, given some sort of warning or something to the person on top. But
all right, well, then let's move into this question. This is a good and
all right, last one.
All right, this will be our last one. It's from Habugi. What BJJ tournaments would you say has the best tournaments has the best rule set for all belt levels? And I don't know if we can answer that. I might say advanced to beginner. I think the best run tournaments, if you just ask me about the best run tournaments, if you want to do one, is IBJJF. They always do well. Like, you're going to have more often than not, you'll have some higher level competitors, but you will get people in your division. You're not going to have to go up 2 weight classes or whatever, you'll probably get somebody that's around your skill level, you know, and around your weight class. So I think that's kind of nice. And it's well organized, well run.
Yeah. So the I
mean, regional stuff's good too.
Well, yeah. So as far as like good tournament that's like well ran, IBJJF like is good. I mean, like people can hate on them all they want to because they're the big show in town. But like you'll know they have it down to like where you'll have a pre-schedule or a schedule and say, hey, listen, the match is going to start at 2:30. You need to be there with like you get there an hour in advance. Most of the time, and there are some exceptions. Like I've been doing this for a while. Most time, and they're pretty on the money within like a half an hour difference. And so it's pretty nice. And so you don't have to be there super early in the morning, whatever. You weigh in you weigh in right before you compete. So you don't have to worry about massive amounts of, you don't have to worry about anybody like cutting 20 pounds and then showing up in your weight class the next day, because if you have a day before weigh-ins, you can do, I mean, I remember cutting tons of weight and then like going down to the smaller weight class. And then all of a sudden you go into people who didn't cut weight, you're massively bigger than them. So you can't really do that because otherwise you're not going to feel too hot. And again, you can go back and forth. It really comes down to your style of competition because, or your style of jiu-jitsu. This is one of the things where I like the thing about jiu-jitsu where we don't have a big governing body, which allows us to have all these different types of tournaments. You have sub-onlys. You have sub-onlys with like certain certain restrictions, like a fight to win, where there's a sort of a judging system. And then you have like EBIs, which is sub-only with an EBI round, which basically, if you want to think of it, has a submission or a point system, right? Because either you score on the person because you hold them longer, you get a submission faster than them, well, then you win on that 1 point or whatever, if you want to consider like that. And then you have tournaments like IBJJF style tournaments that have a whole point system. I don't necessarily dislike the point system. I never did. I think that there's something nice about it. I think that in a lot of cases, not always, I think that a lot of times those points can create some action because people have to move. And so people will like expose themselves to not have points scored against them, which creates all these cool transitions and stuff like that. It can also create passivity too. But again, there is no best tournament. If you were getting started though, I would just say like the best tournament getting started is, go to the regional ones. And then as far as like the advanced people, then you're going to the best tournament that suits your game. Do you have a terrible style for scoring points? Well, then you need to find sub-onlys. Do you have a really good wrestling style? ADCC styles are going to be great for you. If you have kind of a hybrid of those two, IBJJF's perfect because you can pull guard or you can take down. They can be great for you. So again, it really comes down to, and a lot of times what will end up happening is if you're getting ready for a competition, you'll start to learn how to mold your style or your game to that point system or to that scoring system. So just an idea.
Point, yeah. And do we got any more to give away? Was that it?
Let's see here. We'll give away
Habogi. And it's on there. If you want a product, email thechujitsupodcast@gmail.com.
We'll give away one more rehab course.
Oh, rehab course. All right.
Yeah. So that'll give us like 2, 3. There we go. All right. So guys, that'll be it for today. So again, thank you guys for joining in on us. I know that the thing is going to all of a sudden the people
it's going to drop.
It's going to start dropping. But just again, to thank our sponsors for helping make this podcast happen. And even some of you guys are getting gifts from them. Check out our sponsor, Charlotte's Web. If you guys have never used CBD, I encourage you to try it out. It's great for helping improve recovery from training and all the stuff that we do. So it's one of the reasons why I personally like it. It's a part of my recovery routine. I use it at nighttime. And again, they have that new version. So
it's a sport. I think it's called like the Sport
Edge or something like that. Yeah. But they have a new version of it that they just came out with that has released that is NSF certified, which means you will not get popped for any banned substances. It's endorsed by the Major League Baseball Association. So it's pretty cool. It's a pretty big deal. If you guys want to check them out, go to their website at charlottesweb.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20 for 20% off the order. If you guys want to get some awesome jiu-jitsu gear or merchandise made by a black belt jiu-jitsu practitioner for other jiu-jitsu practitioners, you can check out epicrollbjj.com. You can see the shirt.
There it is.
That I'm wearing right now. And if you guys go through and watch some of my YouTube videos, if you ever see like the Kimura shirt or the triangle shirt or some of these other these jiu-jitsu related shirts that I'm wearing in my channel, they're almost always either mine or it's Matt's. It's Epic Rolls. And again, if you guys want to check him out, he makes really cool, high quality stuff with great designs. And that's at epicrollbjj.com. The promo code is Jiu-Jitsu for 15% off. Again, someone said earlier, you said your beard game is strong today or something like that. Well,
our beard game.
My beard game is made stronger with the Manscaped trimmer.
So is my head game. I actually use Manscaped trimmer too for that.
Oh, just to kind of.
Yep. That's all I got left, buddy. I just got the beard game. No more head game.
That's okay.
That's it.
I'm still rocking a little bit left.
You got a nice thick head. I could use half of that, man.
It's starting to fall out. My hairline's starting to recede a little bit.
Oh, stop it. It's hilarious.
I've been griping about this for about a year.
Yeah. I was griping it for how long? I was griping about mine for how long? You know, it looks fine. Looks great.
Thanks, buddy. I'm glad I look great to you.
You do. You look great, man.
I don't keep telling me that.
Oh boy.
Good. Yeah.
Let's make it weird.
Jess doesn't tell me enough.
She doesn't?
No, she does.
I talked to her yesterday. She is as sweet as ever. I think you're making that up.
That's because you don't know her well enough.
Oh, I do know her well enough. You probably deserved all of it. She talk about Jess. She's the sweetest.
She's a sweetheart.
She is.
But again, guys, if you want to check out Manscaped's products, again, they make a lot of cool products. I've used everything from their trimmers, for the beard, the nose, everything, the balms, the soaps, everything they make, everything is high quality. I like the smell of everything else. And so again, happily recommend it. Check them out at manscaped.com. Promo code is Chewjitsu20 for 20% off and you get free shipping. And again, guys, if you guys want to get the bonuses that I was talking about earlier at the beginning of the podcast. So we have a Patreon set up for the podcast. It helps support the podcast, all that jazz. You guys, sure you've heard this sort of spiel before. Whenever you join the Patreon for the podcast, which is up there right now, patreon.com/the Chewjitsu Podcast. Along with joining it, you'll get access to all this exclusive content we've been adding on for years, but you'll also get access to 2 cool bonuses. One is a warm-up routine. It's like a stretching and warm-up routine that Eugene put together specifically for jiu-jitsu practitioners. I came up to Eugene and I was like, look, bro, you got 20 minutes to put people through a warm-up. And of course, he's like going on. He's like, but there's so many different exercises and like 20 minutes. That's what you got. And so he put it together, condensed it down to a little over 20 minutes. We've run several groups of these camps that have come to my gym through it. Everybody always gets done. They're like, bro, that felt so good. My body feels so relaxed and so limber in comparison to how it felt before. And so again, I always encourage people to check it out. If you're someone that's inflexible or you'd like to improve your mobility for jiu-jitsu, it would be a great thing. Again, 20 minutes. It's awesome, right? 20 minutes and you're done, and you can do that a couple times a week. You'll notice a big difference over the course of a couple months. Along with that, you'll get access to a seminar that I recorded a few years back where I was showing some of my favorite gi and no-gi techniques. And again, put them together in one. You can check it out. And then last, guys, but not least, if you want to join my email list and get my daily email, you can do so by going to my website at chewjitsu.net/join, JOIN. And that's it. That's it, guys. So you guys stuck with us, and you guys
appreciate it very much. Yeah.
And it's funny that some people do, because the other day I posted, because we, like on the last podcast, we were talking about Thomas Sowell.
Yes.
And I was saying, like, hey, listen, don't send me all your crazy stuff about political views. Like, I'm just sharing an idea with you. And he replied, he kind of threw that in there at the end of the podcast, or in one of the posts I made. And I was like, yeah, I'm glad to see you guys are actually watching to the very end.
There are a lot of people are, man. I think the fun thing is, when we do this stuff with the ads and whatnot, like I tell people no all the time. Like, I'm not doing, like, if you want to skip it, that's cool. Like, you're not gonna get in the middle. You're gonna get your content, and then you can do whatever after.
This is a real quick story, guys, and I'll let you go.
Let's hear it.
So one of my favorite things that was sent to us, that someone's like, hey, push this product for us, sell this stuff, right? They send us this stuff, and I don't want to put anybody on blast or anything, so I just kind of just say no. But they sent us these like protein supplements, right? And one of them was a protein bar. And generally speaking, I don't really like protein bars anyway, because they're generally not great, and if you want to make them good, you got to add too much junk to them. So I'm like, I'll do a protein shake. But this protein bar was atrocious. Like, I remember opening it, and it was just like, if you guys have ever lifted weights and you've had like weightlifting chalk, I felt like it was this crumpled up weightlifting chalk.
It just like sucked all the moisture out of your
bro,
mouth.
It was so bad. I was like,
like I was reading the ingredients on the powder, and it was like misspelled. There was stuff misspelled. And I was like,
well, in this one, it was like the flavor was birthday cake, and it was like, you're gonna love this deep, rich, chocolatey flavor. I was like, but this is birthday cake. And it wasn't like chocolate birthday cake, vanilla birthday cake. So I was like, that is gonna be a no. Because I could only imagine someone like takes that recommendation and they get that chalky protein.
We got it
sucks the life out of their mouth.
We got one for remember we got the chewable male the boner pills.
Oh yeah, we did get boner pills, didn't we?
And I'm like, no, we didn't try them. But we just cut it off at the beginning. I did send it to Chew because we got a good chuckle out of it. But people promote that stuff. I mean, I'm not saying if you need that, great, but it's just like,
if you need a boner
it's like,
pill,
how are we going to be talking about this on? So, how was your boner pill the other day, Chew? Did it work for you?
When I'm doing jiu-jitsu, sometimes I just need a boner.
Yeah, well,
I mean, yeah, it's interesting, that stuff. And like, I'm like, my thing is too, is like, are you guys actually looking at our like base of people? Like, what makes you think that they want a boner pill?
I don't know, but look, nothing wrong if you need one. No judgment here. But it's just probably not the best talking point we're talking about now. Maybe people might want to find out. They might message us, say, "What? Oh, boner pill, you're all talking about." But you know how it is. But it's just silly stuff. But it's fun. It's fun to get some weird products that we're like, I don't know. And they might be gone tomorrow. Like these people supported us for a while, and we support them.
Some guy Habugi says that Blue Chew. No, it's not Blue Chew. That wasn't the company. That's funny though.
Yeah, it was.
Huh?
I think it was.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, it shows how much I pay attention.
Yeah, I think it was.
Okay.
But they might be the only ones with like I think it's what it was. And I was like,
I mean, man, and
I was like,
it might work great. And if you need it, whatever.
I was like, is that like dog? Is it like a dog treat or something? Like, is that what we're doing? Like a dog treat? And then I didn't know, and I started looking it up, and I was like, all right, cool. But anyway, guys, thank y'all for joining us.
Thank you guys for joining us. Appreciate you guys being here today. I hope you guys had fun, and we'll talk to you next time.